Em 1945, 2 anos antes da queda de Roswell, um objeto desconhecido caiu na cidade de Trinity, Estados Unidos. 2 crianças foram testemunhas, e esse caso só veio ao público muito recentemente. Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, boa madrugada. Eu sou o Thiago Luiz Chiquete, co-editor da revista UFO, presidente da Comissão Brasileira de Ufólogos e diretor nacional da MUFON no Brasil. Sejam bem-vindos ao canal Investigação Ovni, que hoje conta com 2 presenças ilustríssimas para a nossa entrevista. Ninguém mais, ninguém menos do que o professor Jacques Valée. Isso mesmo, o famoso ufólogo cientista, pesquisador que compartilhou muitos estudos com J. L. Hynek. Além dele, teremos também Paola Harris, uma pesquisadora que já foi da MUFON, especialista em exopolítica. Eles 2 investigaram um caso incrível ocorrido antes de 1947, ou seja, antes do início da era moderna dos discos voadores, antes da queda de Roswell. E é o caso de um objeto voador não identificado que caiu, que pousou, que foi deixado em 1945 na cidade de Trinity, nos Estados Unidos. Eles, durante 4 anos, investigaram esse caso no mais absoluto sigilo. E aqui, nessa entrevista exclusiva e inédita no Brasil, eles vão contar muito sobre este livro. Trinity, The Best Kept Secret. O mais bem guardado segredo. Vem comigo para essa incrível entrevista. Mas antes de começarmos, mais um lembrete. Se você gosta do conteúdo desse canal e quiser sempre saber que há vídeo novo, você tem 4 coisas a serem feitas. A primeira, óbvio, se inscreva no canal. A segunda, marque o sininho, o lembrete. Mas não é só isso. Você tem também que comentar e dar like em todos os vídeos do canal. Dessa forma, o YouTube vai entender que você é engajado com o assunto, gosta dele e não vai esquecer quando tiver um vídeo novo e te lembrar. Thank you, Dr. Jacques Valée and Paola, for get my invitation to this interview. I know the Brazilian audience just love this subject, this book. It's very interesting. I took just 2 weeks to read all of this book in English. 2 weeks. And it's an amazing book. I was speaking with Dr. Jacques Valée before we got the interview, that I wrote 13 books. One of these books is this one, UFO Crashes. We have more than 100 cases of UFOs or something, but mysterious cases. But I didn't have this one. So it's amazing, it's a new one for me. And I think the Brazilian audience gonna love it because it's very interesting. It's a great mystery, and you two did a wonderful, wonderful research about it. So thank you very much, Dr. Jacques Valée and Paola, for being here. And I would like to start with the same questions for you both. That is, how did you start investigation the UFO phenomenon?
Well, the UFO phenomenon, not this case, right? The UFO.
But just to know you better, and then we get into the book. Just a resume.
Well, I saw the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and in 1980, and I was very emotional about the material, but I'd never seen a UFO. I never got involved in any of this. And I went to Evanston, Illinois to find out if this was real. And I met Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and he had the Center for UFO Studies. And because I could speak Italian, he asked me to work with him for 6 years, 1986, until he died. And I became a personal family member. And also, you know, I know his family, but I never met Jacques because Jacques was in California at the time. So I've only known Jacques for the last 4 years, but it was his character in Close Encounters that really moved me when I was watching it. And so I'm very, very lucky to have had these great teachers who are scientists. So I knew that UFOs were real from the very beginning as of 1980.
So I saw a UFO when I was a teenager, and that image has stayed with me all my life. This was on a weekend. I was at home working with my father on some furniture we were making together. And my mother called me because there was something in the sky, and she was down in the garden, in the yard. And so I came down and I saw a disc about a kilometer away, less than a kilometer, over a church in a town called Pontoise, which is about an hour outside of Paris. This was a beautiful afternoon, blue sky, sunny, no problem in the atmosphere. It was the image was very clear, and it was not moving. On top of the disc, there was a small dome, and I could see it very clearly. The next day, I told that story to a friend of mine from school, who's, excuse me. Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
So I seem to have lost the image here. I've lost so I may have to restart. No, okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Can you see me? Okay, good. There was a glitch in my computer. So he had seen the same thing from his house, which was about 500 meters away from my house. And I asked him to draw it, and what he drew was exactly the same thing I had seen. I told that observation to my father. He thought that it could be a new prototype of a new aircraft or a new helicopter, although it really didn't look like a helicopter. It was silent. And I convinced myself there were many new airplanes at the time. You know, the first jets were being invented, were being tested, and so on. So this was doubtful for me, and I sort of forgot it. And then my first job a few years later was at Paris Observatory in 1961. And then I found that there were many cases by the public and by scientists and by astronomers that had never been published. And then I remembered my observation, which was similar to what people were reporting in France. And that convinced me we needed to do research about this. So I had the opportunity to come to the United States as both an astronomer and a computer scientist, and then met Dr. Hynek as well, and started working with him in 1963, and worked with him at the observatory at Northwestern University for 4 years. So during those 4 years, through Dr. Hynek, I had access to the files of the US Air Force and computerized all the files, and then started looking for patterns. And then that was really what convinced me that the phenomenon was absolutely real and had extended over a long time in our history.
That's great. That's great. Well, Jeff, just before we get into the details of the Trinity of the book, just give us a glimpse, a resume about the case, please.
Well, Paola should do that because she was the one who introduced me to the case. Before I became involved, Paola had been working on that case for 4 or 5 years. She had gone to the site. She was really the first researcher who took an interest in the case. Most UFO researchers, even in America, really didn't think much of the case because there was no real report, and everybody was interested in Roswell. So they all went to Roswell. They did not spend too much time, at this particular case at Trinity. So we are rediscovering it thanks to Paola.
Merci beaucoup.
No, that's true. I mean,
I know. I want to tell you, it's really great because Jacques and I worked on this together, and I really am encouraging researchers to cooperate and work together because it took both of us, my expertise with interviewing people, and his mind, his scientific mind, his logical mind is able to put together something that I was working on 5 years before he came along, and I was working on it. I brought MUFON down there. I brought Jaime Maussan down there. I brought the whole world down there, and it did not have an effect on anybody. But then Jacques came along and he realized the importance of this case. And the case is important because it is 1 month after the atomic bomb. So it's the timing. It's the timing of this crash that is not really a total crash because the object kept its integrity. It is the fact that we know where it happened. Roswell, it's 3 miles, debris. We have the witnesses at the time, both witnesses were alive. Remy Bach has since passed on, and I found a third witness. And we have no story where human beings went inside the craft for a while. So this is a unique case, but I'm going to tell you also, you said you wrote a book on crashes. Ryan Wood has a book called Magic Eyes Only that has 93 crashes. I don't know if you've seen that book, but the 1945 case is in that book. I had seen that case. I was in Italy in 2000. I think it was about 2003. I came back to the United States in 2007 to live. But I think I read it in the Socorro Guardian newspaper, the 2 little, and they called them Indian boys, and they weren't Indian, they were Hispanic. Although the image on front of Trinity is an Apache grandmother of Jose, Mama Grande. Yes, that's Jose, Apache grandmother, and Jose with his horse. So what we're dealing with here is a crash that's mentioned in Ryan Wood's book, that I read the newspaper article of, that I realized the 2 boys were still alive. And as synchronicity or coincidence would happen, the son of the pilot that flew over this crash, William Brophy, contacted me and gave me the name of the 7-year-old and his telephone number. So for 6 months after I moved back to the United States, I had Remy Baca on the phone talking about this himself. Now I gotta tell you, because I'm gonna add about research. Research needs to be done on the field. You can't call on the phone and talk to somebody and that's it. I started going down there when Remy Baca died in 2013, and was going there every year to the crash site interviewing Jose, who still lives in Socorro. So I was doing this. I was bringing everybody down there. We have so much film footage. Nothing was happening. And I'm going to do a little aside because I think everybody's waiting for the government to release stuff, and that's not where it is. People need to do their own research. They need to do this on their own. But anyway, what happened was Jacques Valée then contacted me. And when Jacques contacted me, he was interested in the metals because the 9-year-old had gone inside the craft and pulled a piece out. And I had the piece. I had it in a bank safety deposit box for 2 years. He had given it to me. So Jacques was asking about the metals, and then he got interested in the case. And then I'm going to add field research. The last 4 years, he and I have been on location at least 3 times a year, always speaking to Jose.
Oh, you were amazing, because how did you manage to keep this investigation confidential? You guys are better than military, because nobody knows about this investigation. 4 years investigation with no clue.
Well, we had to keep it secret because, Jacques was saying, we've got to keep the integrity of the site. You can actually see the circle where this thing landed. You can see the diameter. You can see that it's 13 miles away from where the atomic bomb exploded. So we were good. We were both very good. We kept it secret.
We're better than any military.
Well, from my point of view, I have been accused by ufologists of not taking an interest in crashes. Well, that's a valid accusation. I'm guilty. I was interested in crashes. I read those books. I read the books about Roswell. I even met some of the people who had done the research. I mean, I was a friend of Stanton Friedman, for many years, and I respected his research. But when I discussed a case like that with scientists and with Dr. Hynek and others, they said, look, it's a fascinating story. It could be true, but we don't have the proof. We don't have material that we can take back to the lab and study. Okay. So there wasn't much that, as a scientist, that I could contribute, other than being interested like everybody else. That changed when a friend of mine who was from New Mexico, he had grown up in New Mexico. His family used to have ranches with cattle in that area around Socorro and White Sands and all that. And he told me that there were cases in the area that we should study together. So we started going out with a metal detector and a shovel to dig up, to try to find pieces of metal under the ground where there had been a crash that had been recovered by the army, by the American army, because there was so much material in those cases that they could not take away everything. There was always something that remained. So we started doing that research, and then he mentioned to me the case, the Trinity case. And he had met Jose Padilla, the witness, independently of Paola, and he told me this is a case we should study. And then he was killed in an accident.
Ron was his name, right?
Ron, yes.
Yeah. And so at that point, I thought I should continue, the research on this, because we had just started. And as you know, there are quite a few cases around New Mexico. The other thing that had changed was that my colleagues in science were increasingly interested in that research, and that there was new equipment we could use to test the samples. if you find a piece of metal in the field and you analyze it and it turns to be iron with some copper, well, so what? I mean, that doesn't really teach you very much because somebody could have dropped it there. It could be from a factory, it could be from a lab, it could be anything. So what is important is to be able to test the isotopes. In other words, to test it at the atomic level. And that was very, very difficult to do and very expensive. But now we have access to machines, especially here in Silicon Valley. We have new equipment that we can use to do that kind of analysis conveniently. And we have the technicians and the engineers and the people to advise us and the metallurgists to advise us in that research. So that changes everything. So I became fascinated with the case. I wanted to know more, and then I contacted Paola, about 4 years ago, and she invited me to meet Senor Padilla and to go to the site with her, and that's what led to the book.
Yeah, I read some interviews of you and watched some interviews on YouTube, and I listened some critics about not bad critics, but people saying that the testimony of the two boys who would have seen the crash of the UFO and they collected some kind of strange material, this material, can't give you or give to the people the impression that there is a little evidence to support the case. I mean, just two kids. Where are the other testimonies? Because in Rosa we had more than, let's say, 300 first-hand testimonies. The fact of we just have two testimonies and you discover a third one, but two of them were kids. People say that, well, that's not great evidence to support the case. What do you think about it?
Let me answer that first. I will never take anybody's criticism unless they've read the book, because you cannot just throw out sentences like that to kids. You read the books, you know the details the two kids gave us. You read the books, so you and I can have a discussion. Today, researchers do not read anything. They just criticize. They have not read the book. Our own researchers, our famous ones, have here in America, have not read the book because people don't read anymore. However, so that sentence, the only way I would address it is, did you read the book? Because children are the best witnesses for traumatic events. If they said to me, why did they wait 60 years? I would say to them, because the 9-year-old went in and stole something he should not have taken maybe, and he felt guilty, so he's not going to talk about it for 60 years. Now we have the peace. And this particular case is not, and Jacques will address this, is not in the Air Force files for a reason. But I will add a detail to you that's very important. When I'm speaking for 4 months with the 7-year-old, Remy Baca, who died, in 2013, he told me that because he worked for the governor of Washington State, Dixie Lee, and because he was Hispanic and he helped get her elected to the Democratic Party, she showed him his case to thank him, and it was in the files of the Atomic Energy Commission. So he can't make that up. And he, for many years, knew that they were not going to talk about this because they were living in two different places. One was living in Rollins Heights, California. That's Jose. The other one was living in Gig Harbor, Washington. And so they had reasons for not talking. But then I had the expertise to interview them separately and then interview the third person, Sabrina, separately. And when Sabrina's telling me about the materials she had and the materials they found, and they're all telling the same story, I don't think they called each other up to confirm each other's stories. In fact, Sabrina had not seen her uncle Jose in many, many years. And I sponsored a reunion for them in Socorro after 25 years. So they're all telling the same story. So I'll let Jacques talk about the file, where the file could have gone.
Well, my, for a long time in my life of investigation, I had the privilege of having, my wife with me, helping me interview the witnesses. And she was a child psychologist with degrees from Paris University. She had been a teacher, and she was specialized in special need children. And she kept telling me that children were the best observers because children don't have preconceived ideas. And if you talk to aircraft accident investigators, they will tell you the same thing, that the adults project images from their own life, from their own experience into their memory. Children don't have that. So children will describe the accident in an aircraft, for example, in a completely factual manner. Think of the movie we've done with Juan Perez in Argentina. In the case with Juan Perez, there is no question that this happened, and he's an outstanding witness. The images, also those images remain in the mind for your entire life. I mean, what I saw when I was a teenager, I still can relive that moment very, very clearly. Okay, so the idea that they were bad witnesses because they were kids is not true. It's not valid psychologically. It's not valid. Okay, on top of that, what Paola just said, is, of course, we are not going to take just the testimony of the two witnesses. So we can tie down the case. We can tie it down at both ends. First, at the front end, there was an army pilot who saw the accident. He was asked to. No, we should back up and we should tell the audience what happened. These two kids are in the field because it's the end of the war. Everybody is still in uniform. All the adults are gone. They are either in Japan or still in Berlin and in Germany on the fighting front. The war in Europe has just stopped. The war in Japan is stopping now because Japan capitulated 2 days ago. Okay, this is 2 days after the Emperor of Japan capitulated. Okay, this is a unique moment in history. The two boys are there because they have to take care of the property. The property is 80,000 acres. Okay, it's a very large ranch. Okay, and this is the United States. Okay, big cattle ranches. They have to take care of the cattle. There are animals on the range. You have to find them. You have to make sure that they are okay. In fact, that day they are looking for a cow that has had a calf. They want to find the baby. They want to find the calf. They want to take care of it. They want to make sure everything is good. They're also there to take care of the fences around the property, around the ranch, so that the cattle doesn't escape. So I mean, they're responsible for that, because everybody else, is at war, okay, and has not yet come back. So they are there, and they hear a boom because an object has come from the sky over their head and hit a big communication tower. That tower, was about 75 feet high, about 25 meters high, and it controlled communication for the north end of the atomic range, okay, in White Sands. White Sands is very, very large. It's a large piece of desert where the bomb was developed, okay? It was a secret area. It's still secret at that point. And there are different communication towers to guide aircraft over the base, okay? So the object hits the tower, bends one of the legs of the tower, crashes under power. It didn't blow apart like an airplane would have, an airplane would have tumbled and fallen there. That object kept its integrity. It was shaped like an egg or an avocado, and it glides down. It plows a boulevard all the way down the hill under power, and makes a turn and stops, okay? The kids see all that. It happens over their head. Remember, this is 1945. This is wartime. Everybody has been told, if you see an accident and you're the first responder, you're the first witness, you have to go there and help the pilot or help the people who are injured. There is no concept of flying saucers. The word flying saucer is going to be invented at Roswell 2 years later, okay? Roswell has not happened. Kenneth Arnold has not happened. There is no concept of flying saucer. It's not in the press. It has never been reported, okay? So they don't know what it is. They assume it's some sort of prototype that crashed. So they go there, okay? The brush is on fire. The object is not on fire. The object is, again, has kept its integrity. There is one panel missing, okay? The kids go there and try to approach it, trying to help the pilots. They are confronted with 3 short beings who are inside. They stay inside the object, and they seem to be in distress. And at that point, they realize these are not human pilots, okay? That they are humanoid. They don't have a helmet. They don't have anything over their heads. They can see their heads, they can see their eyes, but these are not human. So they stop about 60 meters away from the object there. In the meantime, as Paola was relating, there is a pilot was coming in a bomber, probably a B-29, that was coming in to land at Alamogordo, which is the air base at White Sands, okay? The tower at Alamogordo asked him to investigate the communication tower because they've lost the communication for the north end of the range. So he circles the tower. He sees that the tower has been damaged. And then he reports the fire in the brush. And he reports that he sees 2 little kids next to an egg-shaped object. So we know it happened. And we know it happened the way the kids are reporting it to Paola some years later, many years later, okay? At the other end, we have, as Paola related, Paola discovered a 3rd witness, which is Sabrina, who was from the same family, but she was on site some years later, and she heard all the stories. So she can reconstruct what happened because she saw the metal. She saw the materials that the father of the kids had recovered at the site. So we have the case is bracketed completely by independent witnesses, including an Army pilot. There was no Air Force at the time. There was no American Air Force. There were airplanes, but they were under the Army. So this was the Army Air Force. So it's important. The people who comment on this have not done their homework. They have not studied the case, okay? There is a history there which is documented all the way through. The kids stayed on the property during the entire recovery of 10 days. We know what happened the first day. We don't know the second day because they were in town helping their father. But we know when they came back with the father on the third day with a policeman from the state of New Mexico, the father and the policeman went inside the object. The object was open. The beings were gone. The creatures were no longer there. We don't know why. There are lots of things we don't know. So we're at the beginning of this research. Okay, the book is not the end. The book is the beginning. And we are inviting people to help us in that research. And we're getting scientists involved in analyzing the metal and doing all of that. The kids are going to be there the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day, during that entire time. And they will watch the recovery by the American military of how they recover that object, how they clean the site and everything they do. Nobody is paying attention to them. They're hiding in the bushes. It's their land. It's their property. They know how to hide. They leave their horses away. They were always on horseback. When you see the property, you understand why. And they were hiding in the bushes, fascinated with what was happening there. So we have that case has outstanding features that no other case in history has. Number one, the witnesses, it happens on their land. They are there when it happens. That's not true at Roswell. At Roswell, there was nobody there. You know, it took a while to find a crash site. They knew something had crashed. And yes, Roswell is very important. But this case helps us understand Roswell, okay, which happens 2 years later, okay? So they have access to the craft. The father and the state policeman go inside. They tell the kids never to talk about it, and the kids will remain silent for 70 years, okay? There are several reasons for that. One reason is what Paola said. The main reason is that, yes, later on when the soldiers were away, they sneaked into the object and they stole an instrument that was on the wall. There was only one instrument inside that object. We can go into, you know, what else was there, the configuration, the size and so on, but they went there and there was that one instrument that they took from the wall. So they are very afraid that they will be accused of stealing something. They didn't really steal it because it was, you know, it didn't belong to the army. It belonged to whoever, you know, made that craft. So
it's not made in China. It was not made in China.
It was not China. No, or you know, and it was not Stalin. It was not Hitler. It was not okay. So a number of stories have been spread to sort of hide, to make the case, you know, to sow doubt about that. There is no question, you know, about that, the way Paola has been able to document it with her interviews. And then we have, you know, we have the device and we are studying it. So the other unique things is that they had access to the site for 10 days after the crash. They saw, they can document, they told us how the object was recovered. And then, as Paola says, we have the document that Ramey Baca saw from the Atomic Energy Commission. So that explains why the witnesses never revealed what they had seen. Even when Roswell was on television and everything else, they never came up to talk about what they had seen. So when you put yourself in the conditions of the war, of World War II, of the end of the war, when you go to the local cafe, you still see those posters that say, you don't talk. If you see something, you know, you're going to be in trouble if you talk about it. You know, there are spies around. There were German spies, you know, around the atomic research. So if you see something or you hear a conversation, you don't talk about it. And they've kept that philosophy all their life, okay? The other big question is why, you know, I went through all the files of the US Air Force, okay? There were a few classified files that I couldn't see at the time, but most of the 20,000 cases in the Air Force files, I've gone through with Dr. Hynek, okay? We had copies of everything. By the way, any scientist in the United States could have had access to that, okay? And they kept complaining that they didn't have the information. The information was there. The Air Force would have made it available to any scientist who wanted it. At the time, I was not cleared. I didn't have secret access. And I didn't even have, I was not even American. I was still French, you know, with a visa, you know, and I had access to the files. So, okay. So that argument that, you know, that the files were secret is ridiculous. The files were not secret, except a few cases where they were secret, but not because of the UFO. They were secret because a UFO had been detected by a secret radar. So the radar was secret. The UFO was just another UFO, okay? So how come this case was not in the files? And I know people in science who have access to secrets, who have been involved with the Air Force, have been involved with the CIA, okay? And they don't know about this case. They never knew about it. They never knew about it because the system of classification at the time was the atomic secrets. And the atomic secrets are a completely different line of classification from the government secrets, the military secrets, and the foreign diplomacy secrets. So you know, in the United States, foreign affairs are under the State Department, and the State Department keeps the diplomatic secrets. They don't go to the president except when there is an issue with a particular country. And then the president will be briefed by the State Department, by the diplomats, about the intelligence about that country, okay? The main line of secrets that, you know, thousands of people in the United States have the clearance for it are the main technical secrets of the Defense Department and other departments of the government. And then there is a third system, which is called the P, the R, P, and Q clearances. Those are the nuclear clearances. And we know, because this was told to the head of the Canadian project, when he was given some metal to analyze by the American secret establishment, he was told that the UFO subject was classified higher than the nuclear bomb. So that's why that case never came out. And we know that also, again, we have different proofs of what we say here, because as Paola reported, Ramey Baca was shown the file from the Atomic Energy Commission that had to do with the analysis of the craft that was recovered in New Mexico. So we know where it went. It would have been taken by a very large truck back to White Sands, from White Sands to Los Alamos, which was the big atomic factory. And from Los Alamos, it would have been distributed to American industry for analysis, and that has remained classified today. So that's the whole story.
Yeah, I got goosebumps. It's amazing. I read the book, but it's still listening from you both. It's amazing. Well, how did the witnesses describe the shape? You said it's oval, but the types metallic and the appearance of the entities. And the entities were dead. They know this. The entities were dead because they disappeared.
No, they weren't dead. They weren't dead. We can't say that. We can't say they're dead because, first of all, these two little kids never read a book. They never saw TV. They did not know what UFOs were because Kenneth Arnold did not come out until 1947. They don't know what a flying saucer is. And when both of these men who were in their 70s and 80s, when I talked to them, they were talking to me like they were little kids. They did not know what they were looking at. They were very confused. When the 9-year-old, he said he walked, they had binoculars, they went together and all the brush was on fire. And they saw through the door or the panel that was missing, 3 beings that were gliding, sliding. They use the word sashaying back and forth. You can't make that up. I mean, you know, and the high screaming of the beings that sounded like a baby crying, or even better, and this makes credibility. Jose said, when you shoot a rabbit and it's not dead yet. That sentence, when you shoot a rabbit and it's not dead and it's squealing, for him to make that up, that is what he heard. And he wanted to go in and help them. And Remy, who was 7 years old, he was smaller, but he was a responsible kid, started to cry. So Jose said, no, let's go home and tell our father and Sheriff Apodaca, which they did. And for him even to name a Sheriff Apodaca, you can't make that up. I don't know what people are thinking, because you're giving Sheriff Apodaca, you're putting him in a book. So the thing is that, anyway, what happened, and this is funny just to tell you, Jose keeps telling me, oh, well, if I had gone in to help them, I wouldn't be here, Paula, to talk to you today. He said, I wouldn't be here because they don't know what they were looking at or what would have happened. Now, the 2 days later, they went back, the creatures weren't there. We don't know if they're dead. We don't know if their own kind came and got them, which I heard happens sometimes. And we don't know if the army took them away. We know nothing. And Jacques and I don't make anything up. We don't know what happened to the beings. We know there were beings. We know they look like grays with the big head and so forth. We know that there was an exchange. We know these things because of witness testimony. And if you have a discussion with a researcher, tell them to read the book before you have the discussion with them, please, because this is craziness when I hear things like this. So what happened was, we don't know what happened to the beings. And Jacques, you might want to add what the process was after that.
So the kids go home at night crying with their mind filled with strange visions, because even though there was no communication with the beings, it seems that the beings were aware that the kids were there. And there was a form of communication through images that came into their mind, into their little kid's mind, that were overwhelming. images of disasters, of people falling from a tall building. And they are going to have recurrent dreams about that for several years. Okay, both of them. Completely separately, they go their own way, but those dreams are going to stay with them. At night, they have to go home. They get on their horses. They go report to the father. The next day, the father tells them, well, you know, this is probably something for the army. It's not for us, okay? We're just, you know, civilians, we're just witnesses, okay? So we'll report it. So he reports to the state of New Mexico. And Sheriff Apodaca then 2 days later will come with the father, and the kids will guide them to the place, okay? So on day number 3, when they can go back to the site, the object is still there, but they cannot see it. They cannot see it because the object has been covered with branches and so on to hide it. What we think happened was that the pilot who had, you know, Mr. Bravi, the pilot, who had seen this, was probably sent back to find out what that object was, whether it belonged to the military or what it was, okay? Because at that point, you know, the American army has no idea what really happened there. And that thing is sitting there. So we believe he was the first one on the scene, which is, by the way, you know, validated by his son, who heard the story from his father. But we don't have the proof of that, but we have that testimony. That he went there, cleaned the site, and was hiding, made sure the object was hidden so that it could be preserved. Then the army assigned another team to come there and recover the object. So when they go there, it takes them a while to find the craft because it's hidden in the bushes and the trees. But the kids are guiding the sheriff and their father, and they find the thing, and then the 2 adults go in. And they at that point, they tell the kids not to talk about this, that this is much bigger than, you know, than their story, and that they should let the authorities take over the thing. So after that, it's very interesting to see how the recovery takes place, because at that point, the American government doesn't have a procedure to recover flying saucers, okay? Even though it's not a flying saucer, but it's an avocado, there is no procedure. So they improvise. The first thing they have to do is get a truck to lift it and to take it away, okay? But so an American officer, army officer, goes to the house of the father of Faustino Padilla, and in Spanish, everybody speaks Spanish there, remember? And that, again, people have no idea what the culture was at the time. You have a mix of cultures. You have the American Indian culture, which is why we wanted Mama Grande, you know, the Apache grandmother, on the cover of the book, okay? We didn't put Dr. Oppenheimer on the cover. We put Mama Grande, and there was a reason for that. People said, why don't you put the scientists, you know, Enrico Fermi, Dr. Oppenheimer, the great scientists of America and the world, you know? No, we wanted to make it clear who were the people who were there. You know, the scientists were there for 4 years, and then they went back to their university. They didn't stay in New Mexico. The people we talked to are the people who were there before, and they are there now. Okay, these are the same people. Okay, that's where the real impact was. So he talks to the father, and the kids are there and they watch all this. And he says, well, you know, one of our weather balloons has fallen on your land, senor. So the father says, oh, you know, I have many weather balloons because, you know, I have 80,000 acres, you know, and you have weather balloons fall on the time.
All the time.
I know.
You know, they were launching weather balloons every morning to know the direction of the winds, because for airplanes, but also for radioactivity. Remember, there was radioactivity all over that land, all over half of New Mexico. So he goes in the back and he gives them weather balloons. They say, no, we have another weather balloon that's an experimental weather balloon, okay? And the kids are laughing because they know that this was not a weather balloon, you know. So we need to cut your fence. Well, you know, this is a ranch. There's cattle there. If you cut the fence, the cattle will go out. Okay, so he says, why can't you use my opening? Because there is a cattle guard where the cows cannot go, you know, that where you can drive in and out to get to the ranch, to get to the cattle. Says, no, we need to bring a big truck. Well, you know, if it's a weather balloon, why do you need to? So that is the one time when Paola and I had an argument. She was angry at me because I said, we need to ask the witness, you know, Mr. Padilla, how many wheels there were on the truck. And Paola says, you know, that's irrelevant, you know, that's not important in the whole story. Well, it is important because the number of wheels tells you the weight of the object, okay? If it's
That's true, Paola, because I work with that. That's true. That's true.
Yes. Well, what they brought was an 18-wheeler, what they call a low boat, a low boy. So it's a big platform. The truck has 18 wheels. There is a trailer, you know, there is a cabin, and then there is a long trailer. That object, from the whole history and the size of the truck, that object must have been about 4.5 tons or 5 tons, okay? This is not a hoax. I mean, this is not somebody playing a joke, you know, on the atomic program, okay? This is real, okay? So we know that the object was metallic. We know it was incredibly strong because it hit the tower. It essentially destroyed the communication tower. It plowed a big avenue in the ground. It made a turn under power, and it's still there. And when the kids can look in the underside, it was not broken. It was just scratched in the stones and the, you know, the ground and so on. It was scratched, but there was no opening. There was no break, except for that one panel that was opened up when it hit the tower. To tell you how careful the kids were, again, they were responsible. Remember, the 9-year-old was driving the family truck.
He was driving the truck.
They were given
They put
things
the
to
brake
do
on the
that,
pedals.
that an adult would you know, would normally do. Okay, they are driving the truck. Okay, Jose climbed the tower to see where the impact had been, because he wanted to know, 9-year-old, he wanted to know the direction that the object came from. Okay, this is a very bright kid. Mr. Padilla also has an amazing memory, and he can reconstruct. When we asked him for a date, you know, of a particular event, he's going to go through, well, 52, 54, no, it was 53. It was June 1953.
Yeah, he's
Okay, I can't do that. I mean,
he's got a photographic memory, and I've got to tell you that when Jacques and I are talking, because we've been going there for the last 4 years, we saw where the fence was cut. I don't know how many times I've seen that piece. Not only that, there was the old road, and the Army could not take it over the old road. We saw the old road. They had to build a new road. You don't build a new road. Even apart from the kids and everything, you don't build a new road if you're not taking something out of that property. The new road is the only way they could get that craft out. It would have never gone over the old road because the old road had this huge hill. But the only way you could do this, and I'm going to reiterate this because this is irritating for me with my own colleagues, is you have to do field research, which means you must go to the location. So if Jacques and I are going for 4 years and we're sitting at the Owl Bar and Cafe with Jose, we keep questioning him for 4 years. He does not change his story, but he remembers other details. Like he knew those boys. They were the same young men that were doing the recovery that worked on the Manhattan Project, because he saw them at the Owl Bar and Cafe. And how did he see them at 9 years old? He was delivering the hamburger for the hamburgers. They hired him to bring in the hamburger on the trucks. And the people from the Owl Bar and Cafe know Jose. They know him when he walks in with us. They've known him since he was a little kid. This is a town that maybe had very few inhabitants. San Antonio had very few. And the only place everybody met was the local watering hall, which a watering place. They call it a cafe, but it's a restaurant that in 1945, Oppenheimer and the Manhattan scientists had cabins behind it so that Jose saw these guys. So when I went to ask the owner of the cafe about the scientists and the secrecy around the Manhattan Project, she said, we thought they were salesmen or prospectors because they were carrying leather bags. The only way you can do this is to go on location and question the people that are around. Now, Jacques and I, we're sad because it's 60 years later, 70 years later, and a lot of the people like Sheriff Apodaca are no longer there, and a lot of the people died. But we're very lucky that we got the 2 witnesses and the 3rd witness, because this is not a UFO case. This is a case of what happened after we exploded the atomic bomb. And Jacques, you might address that, because it is not an accident that this thing happened 1 month after the atomic bomb.
So I respect the UFO research community. I feel, I'm obviously part of it. But it has, because most of it has been researched in the United States. The people in the United States don't have a sense of history the way people in Europe or people in Latin America have a sense of history. The most UFO researchers are really only interested in the last few years or the last few months. Everybody's fascinated with the Navy, with the Nimitz, with all of that because it's on TV. Okay, so what people react to is what was on TV last night. The history, well, yes, there is a history, but it was very, very difficult when we had a team, of an international team that researched the ancient history. We published a book about UFOs in previous centuries, and people tend to discount all that. They say UFOs started in 1947. And before there were no UFOs. Well, what about all the cases in the 19th century? All the cases before, since the invention of the telescope, and even before the invention of the telescope. So the sense of history is really missing in much of the commentary from ufologists in the US. And so it's very difficult for us to find, help in putting that whole investigation together, because what happened there was, and I had conversations with people in Japan who are reading the book now, and they are devastated about what the book says about what was going on at that point in 1945, because the story we have been taught in school about the capitulation of Japan is not complete. We're being told that the US developed the atom bomb. There was a decision by President Truman to use it. It was tested in New Mexico with a test, okay, a physics test. And then it was dropped on Nagasaki, it was dropped on Hiroshima, and then Japan capitulated. That's true, but that's not why Japan capitulated. It's part of it, but it's not the whole story. And as part of this, I could talk about this case without mentioning the UFO itself. I mean, just what I've learned about history that I thought I knew. I was born in 1939. I remember World War II. The town where I was born was bombed 18 times. Okay, there were 2 bridges that were strategic bridges that had to be destroyed to stop the Germans from retreating. And I saw all that. I was old enough to witness the war. Okay, so I can put myself in those conditions, but I never really learned the Pacific War, so I had to relearn it. And fortunately, there are a number of good books that have been published recently about that, about the war from the Japanese side. The turning point in the capitulation of Japan was due to the emperor. The Japanese army wanted to continue the war. The war could have continued for another 2 or 3 years. The Japanese had fortified the north of Japan. Stalin, having won the Eastern War in Europe, was rearming his army. There were 1 million men under uniform in Russia, with resupplied by us, by the Americans, in armor and guns and everything else, was sweeping through China, Manchuria, pushing the Japanese out of Manchuria and pushing the Japanese out of China, and were going to invade Japan from the north. And then the American fleet, the American Navy, was going to help bombing the fortifications of Japan. Japan had deployed 1 million men there behind a wall, like the Atlantic Wall that the Germans had built in France. Okay, this was going to be the big battle at the end of World War II. It's almost incredible. It's even more incredible than the UFO. The Japanese army was not ready to surrender because of the atom bomb. They didn't care about, well, they cared about Hiroshima, they cared about Nagasaki, but how many bombs did the Americans have? They may have had, at that point, 3 more bombs. The big battle was going to be in the north of Japan. And they were trained in the mind of, the discipline of Japanese fighting, where the honor was more important than your life, okay? And they were going to die fighting this war against the combined forces of the Soviet Union and the United States of America in the north of Japan. There is a meeting under the palace. All the military leaders are there with their uniform and their decorations. It's very hot, very humid in Japan. I've been in Japan, you know, in my work, in my investment work. It's very humid in the summer. They are going to tell the emperor, we have to continue the war. We don't care about the atom bomb. The emperor comes in a very simple uniform and said, gentlemen, we're going to surrender to the Americans. I cannot let my people have this, you know, die in these numbers, because there will be 1 million dead. There will be 1 million dead in Japan. Okay, there will also be 1 million dead on the American side and the Soviet side. It's going to be an enormous battle. I cannot let that happen. One of the generals gets up, salutes the emperor, goes to his office, closes the door, and commits harakiri, okay, because he cannot survive that in terms of his honor. I mean, this is what happened in Japan, okay? At the same time, this object, this avocado, lands or crashes in New Mexico. Is that a coincidence? I mean, this is all within 2 days. 2 days. And then we have, you know, our friends in MUFON and our friends in ufology saying, well, you know, we don't care. It was just another UFO. You know, it was not another UFO. It was a turning point in history. Human history has never been the same. Now we can control, science can control energies sufficient to destroy life on Earth. And it turned within those 2 days.
Yeah, I'm going to add the importance of the book. And if you want to say this, is that it was a message, and that we had joined the nuclear age, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle. From that point on, this planet, if you think of it as a planet, is in danger with what we experimented with in 1945. And something or somebody noticed, and something or somebody made a statement. And that is really the significance of this case. That's 1 month after the atomic bomb. And we went even farther in saying that since Jose and his family, and if you read the book, you know that his mother was blinded because she opened the door and she didn't know that was an atomic bomb. They never told anybody. That 150-mile radius, if you go to the crash site, nothing is growing like it's supposed to. Nothing, everything is dwarfed. The consequences of that one incident in 45 and the message that this crash or this incident in 45 witnessed by 2 children is astronomical. The implication of the book is astronomical, but you need to read it to know this. Otherwise, if you just go online and say, oh yeah, this is what happened, you know, it's so superficial and shallow that I don't think Jacques and I would even bother to discuss it because, you know, and I've got to tell you, because you are MUFON and so forth, that, and I can tell you privately that when I began going back, that on that location were planted toxic plants because somebody knew I was going back, and they weren't really crazy about having this story come out. And the toxic plants, and Jacques and I had them analyzed, that are just in that location, not on the 168,000 acres, are kind of a message that, you know, why don't you let this go? So, and then other things that happened. So it takes a lot of courage, a lot of tenacity. And I read every book that Jacques read on Japan and the children of Los Alamos there, even how, you know, White Sands came about and so forth. in order to understand the whole entire story. And that's his contribution, because I couldn't just do a book on interviews. I mean, it would have been so, it wasn't, that's not how you do things. So I don't know if you have any other questions for us on this thing since you read the book?
Just to finish, okay, it's open. Just to finish, in your opinion, the crash, this incident, was because the atomic tests?
I think it was a gift. I think an object like this. So at the end of the story, the object is sideways on the truck. The reason it's sideways is that it's too big to go under the overpass of the highway. There's the American highway, that is going along the river there. That's the Pan American highway, goes from Canada through the United States into Mexico and into South America. Okay, so there is an overpass. The truck needs to go under the overpass, so they have to put the avocado on the side. At that point, the underside is observable. It's visible. The kids are looking to see if it's crashed or open and so on. It's not open. They know the dimensions. The object is at about 3 meters high, and the floor is flat. Now, we've reconstructed all the details, okay? And, the floor is flat, so there is only a small space under the floor for an engine. There is no opening, there is no jet, there is no propeller. How does it work? So there is a mechanism under the floor that's completely enclosed that allows that object to fly and to make that turn and to generate energy enough to do this landing, this long landing in the dirt, and to turn and so on. So there's a lot of energy that's being generated. We don't know how to do that, okay? This is not relativity. This is not quantum mechanics, okay? This is something else. That's what my colleagues and I are interested in, of course, is what was it that propelled this object and how was it driven? I mean, did these 3 little creatures, were they driving it, and how were they driving it? And this bracket that we've recovered, what role did it play? Was it put there by the army when they needed to maybe wind up some wire for electricity or something? Or was it part of the equipment? The object that was there looked like this, okay? This is a standard, industrial object. It has, just like the one we have, it has an axis here, and then there are openings here where you can hook up a device that will activate a valve or a vein and so on in different kinds of mechanisms. So this is standard. I mean, it existed in 1945, but the one we have has some differences, some interesting characteristics. It's much larger than this, and it does not have a brand, so we don't know where it came from. And also it's in millimeters. Well, in those days, the American military was using inches, and feet, and not millimeters. So there is a mystery that, again, our book is just the beginning of the research, okay? And it's going to be very exciting. and we'd like MUFON to wake up to this and to help us look at, because there are similarities between this case. It's sort of a model for many of the crashes that have happened later. So yes, now we have, maybe it's a way to decipher the mystery of what happened later, because we know the metals that were involved, we know through the testimony of Sabrina, who saw the other things that came out of the crash later on, in later years. We know about those fibers. We don't really understand the fibers. There were things that were still glowing in the dark many years later, so they must have been irradiated. We don't know how that happened or what the sequence is. So there is a lot of research still to be done, and we'd like to enlist, the UFO community to help us complete that research.
Paola?
Yes.
That's it? Well, I am sure that this book is just the beginning, as you said, just the beginning. And I can agree more with Paola and yourself, Dr. Jacques Valée, that we have to research, field research.
Yes, field. Yes. And
I cannot go now because the United States closed to Brazilian citizens to travel. But even that, I cannot go now to research on a field. But I can read the book. I read the book, and it's amazing. It's full of evidence. It's full of testimony. And and I'm sure it is, only the beginning, I hope to be alive to see the rest, because it's amazing.
Well, the research is not going to stop now. I mean, there is no way it could be stopped. There is too much interest now in science, not just in the United States, but all over the world. It's not going to stop. The book is now in French. It's in Italian. It's in Spanish. Of course, it was in English from the beginning, from 3 months ago, and it's going to be. We have people wanting to translate it.
Maybe in Portuguese. Who knows?
I know.
Yes, that's
to
next.
Portuguese,
Yes.
You have to contact me. It's being translated in German right now, and it will be out in German in November. It's because Jacques and I decided that this is for the world. This book is a piece of history. It's not just a UFO book.
Yeah.
So it's a classic. It's a classic. If you're interested in the UFO phenomena and in history, it's a classic. And thank you so much for reading it. I'm so glad to talk to somebody who asks us the right questions. That is an honor for us, because then we have something in common. And
yes, it's an honor for me. I'm a big fan of you, Paola. You know that, because we made contact a few years ago when I bought you 3-4 books. And Dr. Jacques Valée, it's an idol. Seeing the Close Encounters, have all his books. So it's a great honor to me. And I think that now we're probably going to have more witness coming abroad to speak to. I was there, I know more, and it's just the beginning, as I said. So thank you very much for the interview. I'm pretty sure that the Brazilian audience is gonna love it, and they will need for more. And that's why I need Portuguese. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. E então, o que acharam dessa entrevista? Como bem disse Jacques Valée e Paola Harris, este livro é apenas o início. Certamente com essa publicação, com toda essa repercussão que está tendo, novas testemunhas pode ser que surjam e o caso ganhe cada vez mais corpo, mais robustez e seja considerado também um dos melhores casos de ufologia. Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Nos vemos na próxima. Um abraço e até mais.